Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grief the Week. This is Mona Duncan, and Jan is with us, our co-host. As a
Hello,
matter of
everybody.
fact, Jan is the one that is came up with our subject today. So, being conflict adverse. So,
Yeah.
you want to share, Jan, what's on your mind?
Yes. I've been around so many people who struggle with conflict, and they struggle so much they just avoid it at all costs. And I think a lot of them think that they're doing the best thing for themselves, but a lot of time when you don't address the things that are bothering you, they don't go away. and and a lot of times we're in a relationship, and whether it's a personal relationship or a work relationship, and as living in the United States, one of the things that we value is being assertive and to push for what we want. And so I don't want to say that that's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing for us to keep pushing to have the kind of life that we want. But sometimes we end up pushing at somebody else's expense. And sometimes we don't realize it, and sometimes we do. And then the person who is conflict averse will continue to allow us to do that. And there are a lot of instances where it turns out to be to their detriment, where they end up suffering as a result and being unhappy, and they don't know what to do because they've always acted this way, and they say, well, I haven't brought it up in 5 years, why bring it up now? And it's like, well, how do you feel about this? And is it bothering you enough to want to do something? And I can remember years ago that I always avoided conflict too, because it was just like I just didn't want to talk about it, or didn't want to argue about it. So it's like, oh, it'll be okay, it'll be fine, and wouldn't say anything. And then finally realized that I was hurting myself by doing that. And you're not being mean, you're not being selfish when you stand up for yourself. And I had a lot of clients that have protested a bit and thinking that, well, I feel like I'm selfish when I do that. I said, well, if you're not looking out for yourself, who will? And we talk about we need to be nice to people, we need to be pleasant, but that doesn't mean that we allow them to run all over us. So I thought today we could talk about, maybe you can talk a little bit, Mona, about things that you've tried, and I can talk a little bit more about things that I've done, and kind of get a good discussion going about, you don't have to, just because you're being disagreeing with somebody says doesn't mean that you don't like them, doesn't mean that you're being mean. It's that you're standing up for yourself.
Right. And I think pretty much we are born peacemakers.
Yeah.
Or we want the peace, whether it is that natural passive person, as in giving in, so I won't ruffle any feathers, or even whether it is the more aggressive person that is sees the answer and say, I've got the answer here, so I'll speak up and tell you what to do.
Right.
I think deep down inside, it's trying to find some peace. If you can't fix the problem, then let me fix it for you. But in the process,
willing to fix it for us. They know what's best for us, right?
Well, sometimes we think we do, or sometimes we think they do.
Correct.
And so therefore, then we just clam up because you're not listening to me anyway. So maybe it kind of goes back to the fact that we need to honor who we are.
Yes.
To honor our own uniqueness, our own specialness, and that it's okay to speak up. It's okay to have those disagreements, but not let them get into, arguments and conflicts.
Yeah. And that's a big thing. It's okay to disagree with somebody. That doesn't mean that you don't like them.
Right.
And I was very conflicted because my father was one of those that you had to agree with him. If you disagreed with him, and he told me on a number of occasions, you're going against me. And I was like, no, I'm not. There's nothing against you personally. I'm just disagreed with what you're saying. And so that was a hard thing for me to get over, because to me, it meant that you were insulting the person by disagreeing.
Uh-huh.
And it doesn't mean that at all. We can have our own thoughts and just be respectful about them and be respectful to the other person when you talk about the differences, your difference of opinion. I mean, it's good. It's really good to talk about differences of opinion because they may bring up something you hadn't thought about before.
Exactly. It's being open to that. All I can see now, because all we could ever do is give or receive information.
Correct.
And so, but sometimes we need just an experience. Garland and I, we've been married 50 years. And,
wow.
well, a little bit more than that. But what I'm trying to say is it's not a new relationship. And so we had squirrels get into one of the outhouses, one of the outbuildings outside. And the squirrels were getting into the bird seed. And the bird seeds and all that kind of
it's
stuff.
always a problem.
Yeah. So I go out there one day and think, how are we going to keep the squirrels out of here? So I began to look around and where the boards and everything came together, there was some. So I thought, I've got some of that feel it spray. What is it? It's a styrofoam that you can spray into it and it'll fill cracks and holes,
Okay.
Well, anyway, there it is. So I had some of that. So I grab it out and we're going out there and we're looking and pulling things out and kind of rearranging and cleaning out while I'm looking for the holes as to where the squirrels are getting in. And so I'm thinking that Garland is getting really frustrated with me and with the squirrels and life and everything, And I said, just go on and I'll just do this myself. And he said, and I'm here, this is, after a long, long relationship, he said, just because I get frustrated with this does not mean I don't want to do it and I don't want to help.
Okay. Yeah.
And you know what? That was just, and I'm thinking, and then since then I've thought back on my life, and I've said, just get out, I'll do this myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Rather than use the help that is available or get the information that is available, because sometimes we judge someone else's frustration as being, I don't want to, or as being, as being not appreciated.
Yeah.
And so sometimes as we can begin to see where they're coming from, then we can be okay with their not understanding what we're trying to get across.
Yeah, and frustration is something that I experience quite a bit, and I'm very easily frustrated. But that doesn't mean, I can relate to what Garland is doing, but that doesn't mean I don't want to help. And that doesn't mean that I need you to come in and rescue me. That just means that I'm frustrated with what I'm doing right now.
And I'm putting my frustrating kitty outside.
Yeah. But it doesn't mean that I'm frustrated and it's a bad idea to do whatever I'm doing. Those are just the feelings that I have at the moment. And our feelings aren't bad. We don't need to get rid of them. We just need to acknowledge that they're there and I'm having this feeling of frustration. But I can just put it away and say, I'm feeling frustrated, but I'm still going to help. I'm still going to do this. I still think this is the right thing to do. It's just not going as well as I'd like it to. And like I have that with cooking all the time. Because with cooking, yes.
Oh, recouping.
With cooking.
Cooking,
making food, because my husband and I have gone on this whole food plant-based diet, and there's a lot of preparation. We don't buy any prepared foods, and so I'm doing all the chopping and I'm doing all the sauces and all that kind of stuff, and I have all these things lined up that I'm trying. And I've learned that I have to do them in sequence. I can't do them in parallel. So I have my system, but still every once in a while something goes wrong. Like I was trying to do something a little different on the recipe, and I burnt the potatoes, and I was so frustrated that I burnt the potatoes. And then I realized that, I need to have rice with this. I hadn't planned on making rice. And so, all this frustration was building. I said, okay, stop. I'm going to make this work, and I'm going to see what I can make do with what I have. And I remembered I did have some leftover rice, and I can use that leftover rice, and the burnt potatoes, I'll just throw them away, and next time I'll know better. When you're learning to do things, you're going to make mistakes, and it's okay. But you still had that feeling of frustration. But that doesn't mean that I had to have him come rescue me in the kitchen, or it doesn't mean that I was going to stop cooking and we're going to go out to dinner tonight because everything's a fiasco.
Right.
And so it's a matter of understanding your feelings, but yet deciding what I'm going to do about it, or how can I make it work to my advantage, and work so that this is. I'm going to make the best of it. And my husband is very understanding, and he even ate some of the burnt potatoes.
Yes, it is. It's giving a little grace to ourselves as well as to others.
Yeah.
Because in that peace at all costs, we begin to put ourselves down, and even if we're not putting ourselves down, as in, saying ugly things to ourselves, we are quieting ourselves, and it's diminishing us. It brings no resolve.
Mm-hmm.
In trying to, calm that peace, to make the peace, that we have to honor our own uniqueness and our own gifting. And that doesn't mean wallowing in it. It means owning it, honoring it, and seeing how it can be improved.
Yeah.
And thinking it through for the, not only then, give me a little time out here. I need to rethink this so I can state my frustration. I can state my need in a way that is understandable.
Right. But even if that discussion doesn't go well, doesn't mean that you don't ever do it again. I mean, you're learning, you're practicing. Right. And like with my burnt potatoes, I'll go back and try again. I'll try something a little different the next time. And so when we're first starting to understand how to deal with conflict, we may be so upset about it and so nervous about it that it doesn't go well, and we're tongue-tied and we can't make it work for us. But that doesn't mean that we don't try it again. We don't say, oh, I already tried that, it doesn't work.
Right. And you know how we get into routines.
Hello, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
If you have a conflict that you want to address, how do you decide whether to do it face-to-face or on telephone or by email?
Well, good question. Let's think about that. Discuss that for a minute.
Well, it's got you thinking anyway, huh?
Yes, definitely.
Well, I think it depends. It really depends on the person you're dealing with, how serious that relationship, how intimate or close that relationship is, and the issue that's being brought up.
Well, it sounds to me like, Jerry, that you're asking if it's been a conflict in the past that you kind of want to readdress so that it could be discussed or understood, and which would be the best way to do it, face-to-face, email, or on phone.
Yes, that's
as opposed to in the moment that it happened.
Well, these are it's a married couple. They're friends of mine.
Uh-huh.
Not real close friends, but friends. And the husband's pretty darn stubborn. So, and I always feel more comfortable doing this sort of thing by email than I do face-to-face. Always.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know whether that's the best way to do this.
Well, I don't know that there is a best way. It's going to have to be with what you are comfortable with.
Well, of those
and
three
then
ways.
Also, you never know what you're comfortable with may be off-putting to the other person.
Yeah.
Well, of course not. I don't know. I'm not in their head. I'm only in my head.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'd like to give an example of a young man that I just talked with this morning. I work at the prison system, and he is there in transitional housing, and wanted to make amends to someone that relationship was broken, and wanted to give her a call or give this person a call. And so we talked together and, about what would you say and how would you handle this. I played the devil's advocate of, not wanting to receive the apology or whatever. And, but coming to find out, he came in today that whenever he called to get the person's phone number, the person that he asked the phone number for was not even was not comfortable even giving him the phone number of the person he wanted to contact. And it was a big slap in the face for him initially. But the more he thought about it and the more we kind of rolled it over, he felt like that decision was made for him. And sometimes, we want to we need to do what we can do, but if the ball is in the other person's court, we need to leave it there.
Yeah, but that's risk averse, isn't it? Sounds like it to me.
Being averse to it?
Well,
making
leave it there.
Trouble?
That's not dealing with the issue.
Mm-hmm. So he had no way to contact her at all. He couldn't. If he didn't have the email and he didn't have a physical address. Because there's always ways to. If you're really serious about trying to get in touch with this person, to write it out and send it to the friend and have the friend give it to her. Or, if something is that important to you, you can keep going.
Well,
right.
My case is different from that. I have no trouble contacting these people.
Yeah.
That's not the issue.
Yeah.
But I think if you're uncomfortable talking to the person, email is certainly the way to start the conversation and see how it goes. Email is very impersonal. I hate talking on the phone. So I much prefer face-to-face, but I can understand if people have difficulty talking about it, to write it down in an email, or you can just write it down in a letter and have the letter in front of you when you talk face-to-face. There's all kinds of ways to approach it. Just you have to really look at what is that person comfortable doing, because it's very important to have the communication. And so how can we start the communication, and how can we find a way to best?
And I love what you said, Jan. You said you started the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But not going into the conversation with the agenda of everything's going to be solved then. It's starting the conversation and starting the fact that I am concerned about. And, is there any input that I could put in that would, or can I listen to anything that you'd like to share?
Yeah.
To starting.
Let me ask you another question. I believe that most of the time, no communication is bad communication. Most of the time. Is that a valid belief or not?
I don't think you can really generalize on something like that, because every situation is different. People are different. Like with my father, no communication was better because anytime I opened my mouth, I got myself into trouble. And I learned to accept that, and our relationship was on a very superficial level. But if it's a husband and wife and they really want to work through and be happy, I think it's healthy to be able to say what's on your mind, but then to understand how much the other person can take, like Mona said a few minutes ago. How much can they receive? Because sometimes we get on a roll and we start, okay, now's my opportunity. I'm going to unload with everything. That's way, way too much information. And so you have to be aware of how much the other person is willing to take in.
Right.
Talk about
and definitely only go with one issue at a time.
Yes.
And to see if they're willing to talk about it. And if not, then as a matter of fact, I was in a staff meeting one time, and things were being said and so forth, and there was something that I wanted to share, and I asked a question. I said, may I share something? And of course, the person leading the staff meeting was kind of in tune with where I was coming from, and had a feeling that he knew what I was going to share. And he said, "No, you may not." And so, you know what? I didn't. I mean, I shut down, but I didn't shut down. Okay. It's just that I honored where he was coming from, because he was not willing to listen about the comment that I was wanting to make. And because we had history together. And matter of fact, others in the staff meeting, we all had the same history. But anyway, no, he wasn't ready to hear it. So I closed down, and I shut up, and we went ahead with our meeting and talked about other things that needed to be, handled and so forth. And it was a little tension there for a while, but then it was okay, and the meeting was over. 2 days later, this guy called me on the phone, and I picked the phone up when, and I knew who it was, and I picked up and I said, "Yeah," and he said, "Okay, what was it?" So it took him 2 whole days to want to hear what it was that I had wanted, the comment that I had wanted to address at the time. So it goes back to the fact of honoring our uniqueness, but at the same time honoring their uniqueness, and giving us space to settle some things, but also giving them some space to settle some things, and then not rushing in. What is it? Fools rush in where angels dare to tread. And so we don't want to rush in, and maybe we also don't want to appoint ourselves as being the one that settles the issues.
We don't assume that we know all the answers and we know the way it should be.
Right. But if we think, we ask permission.
Yes.
We ask permission. May I speak something this? May I? Yeah. And if they're receptive to it, and it may be 2 days later, it may not happen at all.
And I would think, Lona, like that example you gave with the guy leading that meeting, I think that brought you closer together.
Oh, it did. It did.
Because you did respect him, and he respected you. And I just think that's so important in relationships, that we do respect. It's one of the caring or connecting habits, is that we respect each other.
And also in that being averse to connecting it, if as we can learn to have the courage to say, there's something here I need to address, but I'm not up to it right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because we can be averse to speaking up, but it's back to the passive aggressive. That passive person being averse will get a crawl full.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'll come out in very negative ways.
Right.
That stirs everything up. To be a peacemaker, sometimes we need to roil the water so that we can bring it, we need to stir it up.
Okay.
We need to stir it up in being a peacemaker. Sometimes we need to stir it up so that we can have it here, so that we know what we're talking about. But we can't settle it while it's being all stirred up.
No.
See, it's one of those things that make sense, things that fit, that don't fit. That sometimes to make peace, you have to stir up the issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
As being averse to, sometimes you just have to speak up. And sometimes whenever it's the super aggressive person that's always speaking up, they need to tone down so they'll be heard.
I know you don't want to hear this. Honor me this.
And then whether it's the passive person that has become aggressive because of, not being heard, or whether it's the aggressive person that is overly aggressive, we need to recognize in ourselves and give us a timeout. So that if we have a glass of water here that has mud in it, we've stirred it up, if we just set it aside for a few minutes, it'll begin to calm down. Now, it hasn't cleared anything, but it's begun to settle. And so as our emotions begin to settle, then we can talk about it in I think we talked before, civil and in a civil way.
And I think another message for people who are conflict averse is to understand that when you do bring the issues up and talk about things that are uncomfortable, it can bring you closer together with the other person. And it also can give you a sense of satisfaction that, wow, I stood up for myself. I finally said what was on my mind, and I'm still here. I didn't get hurt. Of course, you have to know your audience too, but you might be afraid of something that could turn out to really be a positive for you, because it's very possible the other person doesn't realize how much it upsets you, even though you think, well, he has to know. Some people just don't. Those cues. They
Right.
really don't, and so you're doing yourself a disservice by not following up on it. And but always do it respectfully. Always do it, where in a kind way, and
Ask permission.
you're asking permission. You're
Just ask permission. May I?
Yeah.
Oh, and sometimes, if you're just being overlooked, you need to say, I'm here. I'm in the room. May I say something? May I get a word in edgewise? Maybe use a little bit of humor, but always, always be in control of ourselves rather than trying to control someone else.
Right. Right.
And sometimes, and because that can get us in so much trouble. Well, I didn't speak up because.
Yeah.
And as we can look at all the becauses we have, we can begin to track our alignments. I don't know if I'm saying this in a way that I know what I'm trying to say, so that it's comes across.
What brought that up to me is when I was a manager of a group, and you'd go and something didn't get done, and you'd go tell your boss that this didn't get done, and then he'd ask you, well, why not? Well, because this guy didn't do it. And when you start blaming like that, then that means that meant that I had no ownership for what my people did.
Right.
And I thought, well, I need to take responsibility for that, because it is still my responsibility to make sure that things get done.
And it's looking at what instead of why.
Yeah. And so instead of trying to blame other people and find excuses why it didn't happen, it's okay, how can we make this happen?
Yeah.
Something you need from me before you get this work done, or understand, this deadline is important. We need to do this. And so you're not off the hook because you can find an excuse out there. If it's something that's very important to you, you need to make sure that it gets done.
Right. So instead, because so-and-so didn't do his job, her job, it's looking at saying, because when we track those becauses, this was the cause, then we are diminishing being true to ourselves.
Yeah.
And instead of, because he didn't do what I asked him to do, and begin to look and see, maybe if I ask in a different way, that we could build a teamwork so that we're doing it for the good of the whole.
Right. Because, what I want may not be what the other person wants, but maybe we can find some common ground so that we can work together and move forward.
Yeah. But as we assume and read minds, then we begin to come up with some alternative facts that may cloud our perceptions.
Oh, we can make up some good stories, can't we?
Yeah. And we see them as a fact. I don't know why they can't this. Well, they're seeing things from a different way than we're seeing it.
Right.
Which gives me, I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and say it. I was overhearing. I was part of the conversation. I was part of a group, and others were talking, and they were talking about, I don't see how people, someone said, that they were working with insurance, trying to sell insurance, and that they couldn't sell insurance. They weren't selling insurance because they didn't know how to overcome it. Said that yet they couldn't afford to buy the insurance, but boy, that big screen TV they had, and that those, and then someone else came in with something else about, well, this one, well, they couldn't afford that, but boy, that big car they had, that fancy car they had. And, they was coming up with all these because. Well, you see, anytime we look at that cause, then what we're doing is we are diminishing the being of the person. And the more I listened to that, and they were, back and forth, several people, and I'm thinking, you know what? I'm going back to Dr. Glasser, back to Dr. Glasser, back to Dr. Glasser. And I'm thinking, in that person's life, fun is more important than security.
Yes, right. That means
and fun. Now, is TV fun? Well, it's seen as a symbol of, because we think in symbols.
Mm-hmm.
And even though we may be bored watching TV, and it's really not fun, all the drinking and all the partying, and I thought this was going to be fun. When's the fun going to start? Because we begin to look for entertainment to be fun rather than making it through good, healthy relationships.
Yeah.
But those needs are so important.
Oh, absolutely.
And that aversion to conflict is a disempowering power need.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's learning to speak up, even if the blood pressure goes up, and even if your sweaty palms.
Maybe you don't do it right then, but at least you address the issue when the mud is all settled down.
Yeah. And speak up. And then ask, I need a timeout. I need a timeout.
Right.
And sometimes we need to take a timeout for ourselves so that we can let someone that is more aggressive take their own timeout.
Right.
As in with, parent-child, or with anyone.
Yeah, right. Anybody, any relationship you have.
And I think the more mature one in any given situation will be the one that puts more conscientious self-awareness thought into it.
Right.
As to thinking as to how this can be resolved.
Yeah. And if the person is not willing to negotiate with you at the time, doesn't mean they never will. It just, again, means it's just not the right time. But it is important to let your ideas be known and make sure that they understand that, no, it's not okay.
Yeah. Well, our time is running down, so we'll bring this to a close. It's been very interesting, and thank our guest for your participation and questions and so forth. I'd like for us to leave today with a quote from Rumi.
Okay.
Anyway, he said, "Yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I am wise, so I am changing myself."
Oh, all right. I like that one. So thanks for that. Thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you next week.